Good afternoon, my name is Josh from CyclonesOZ, and here is your detailed afternoon update on Tropical Low 22U developing in the Coral Sea right now and expected to become Australia's next tropical cyclone, picking up the name of Alfred when likely the Bureau of Meteorology is due to update this system in the next couple of hours or so. This system is rapidly developing offshore from the Queensland coastline. It is expected now to become a severe tropical cyclone at some point in the next 3 days, and before it takes its turn towards the south, where it will then go on to brush past the Queensland coastline. We're going to be talking about this system in great detail. If you are brand new to the channel, please do consider subscribing, and also check out the Facebook page as well for regular updates on this system. But let's get stuck straight into things this afternoon with a look at the satellite imagery on how this system is performing right now. It is now firing up a really significant amount of convection and thunderstorm activity around the system's center of circulation, which, mind you, is now very displaced towards the north. You might be able to see those swirly clouds kind of underneath the dark grey kind of matter that's sweeping into the system through here. That tells me that the center of circulation from this tropical cyclone is right here where the cursor is. Now, that has major ramifications to this system right now, considering all the convection is down here. That means that this storm is currently in an environment of high upper level wind shear. It means that the storm is now very displaced and quite disorganized internally, and it is going to have trouble intensifying over the coming couple of hours. So whilst rapid development has been apparent over the last couple of days, and it is still expected to continue developing, it's still got to take a bit more time to properly organized. It certainly has gale force winds on the southern side of the system, so by technical definitions this is a tropical cyclone, but the Bureau of Meteorology requires more than half of the system's surface area to be covered in gale force winds, and that's not currently what this system has at this time. It's only the southern side that's experiencing the really strong gale force winds, and on the northern side the winds are substantially calmer than that, so not worthy of tropical cyclone status, but I do imagine that's going to change later on tonight. I do believe the next update, which will come out probably about an hour or two after this video is released, won't result in an upgrade to tropical cyclone status here, at least from the Bureau of Meteorology, but later on tonight I'm expecting this to pick up the name of Tropical Cyclone Alfred. In terms of the current impacts that it's providing to Queensland, if we flick back onto the radar imagery, you can see a couple of showers here and there heading up into the Daintree rainforest. They're actually heavy at times, and a few thunderstorms firing up here and there out towards Mount Carbine and Palmerville. Those thunderstorms are delivering some rainfall accumulations between 30 and 60 millimeters an hour. We've also got a line of heavy showers now going for the Cassowary coast as well, between Innisfail up towards Cairns, and those showers will be pretty heavy at times as well. You can see just how much rainfall is currently in around the core of the system here, which shows you how strong some of the thunderstorms are around the system center of circulation. Rainfall rates here approaching 100 millimeters an hour. This really is a significant thunderstorm band that's starting to blow up around the southern side of the system. It is a sign of an eye wall beginning to develop as well, which means this system, once it can get itself adequately organized, it will certainly be in a prime position to rapidly intensify, and I reckon that is going to be the case once this system really does get itself together, which will happen tonight into early tomorrow morning. You can also see wind speeds between 40 and 50 kilometers an hour along much of the Coral Sea Islands. In fact, a little bit stronger down towards the southern areas of the Coral Sea Islands territory, up to about 60 kilometers an hour there, and then winds between 40 and 50 kilometers an hour, gusting up to about 70 kilometers an hour now at Hamilton Island, with a few showers accompanying those areas as well. So these wind speeds are certainly causing a little bit of blustery conditions, and certainly keeping temperatures cool as well, so enjoy it while it lasts across the coastal parts of Queensland. It certainly does feel like a tropical cyclone is brewing offshore, but this system is expected to head away from the central and the North Queensland coastlines. Let's jump into the forecast right now. I would just like to preface this by saying that the forecast over the next couple of days is pretty much set in stone. There's not a lot of discrepancies here between the forecast models, but beyond about Wednesday or Thursday, when this system begins its turn towards the south, the forecast is so murky it's unbelievable, and it's really difficult to say exactly what is expected from this system here. So you can see tightening and more development of the low pressure center expected through tonight into tomorrow morning. Like I said, the forecast model is suggesting that this is going to be a fully fledged tropical cyclone by tomorrow night, and then rapid intensification is expected to kick in through Monday night and into Tuesday morning. We're likely to see a severe tropical cyclone or severe tropical cyclone status attained by Wednesday around lunchtime, and that's when this system is going to begin its turn towards the south, or it will have already begun its turn towards the south by Wednesday, but it's certainly going to start to pick up a little bit more forward motion throughout the course of Wednesday, and you can see this system here moving quite solidly towards the south through Wednesday and Thursday. Still, it's not going to be a fast-moving tropical cyclone, but it's certainly going to have a bit of a destination in mind here. The forecast models as well are now becoming a little bit more on board, and more on board with every single run that this system is going to head towards the south as opposed to the southeast or the southwest. It doesn't really look like neither New Caledonia or Queensland is going to receive a tropical cyclone impact in the next week or so. The forecast models are both back down on landfalls on those islands there. The Axis forecast model is actually calling for a very powerful tropical cyclone. I'll get to the conditions that this system's going to find itself in, but at this time the track forecast is pretty set in stone out towards Wednesday, and then beyond that your guess is as good as mine at this point. It really looks quite uncertain, at least in terms of the forecast and the future of this tropical cyclone. What we do know is that the system is going to be heading, generally speaking, towards the south, and forecast models have it passing between Queensland and New Caledonia. There are still a few ensembles and a few forecast models still calling for that landfall somewhere around Queensland or a very close past. I mean, you can see that here on the Eastern Bay forecast model, and even the GFS takes this system relatively close to Queensland much later on into the forecast period, but I think that's just out of uncertainty at this stage. So whilst we are expecting the tropical cyclone to pass halfway between New Caledonia and Queensland, and probably a little bit closer to the Queensland side of things by the first couple of days of March, the only real impacts will be a couple of strong wind gusts around Fraser Island and a couple of days of heavy rainfall, or moderate heavy rainfall, into the southeast and the south central areas of Queensland, and that is the worst case scenario at this time. And might I add that this isn't a forecast right now, this is more of a projection of what is going to happen into the future. Here, we're still very, very uncertain in regards to this system. So I would just like to say here, before we dive deeper into the forecast and the conditions that this storm is going to have ahead of it in its lifespan, I would like to say this: for southeast Queensland, central Queensland and north Queensland, there is nothing to be concerned about at this time. There's nothing to be worried about. You've got no reason to be panicking about this tropical cyclone. Preparing for this system right now is a pretty silly idea. It's more or less a waste of time, to be honest. Just make sure your cyclone kits are ready if you live north of Bundaberg, but you should be having that all set in place by around September or October in any given year. Just make sure you are prepared for our tropical cyclone impact here and there, just with your working radio, and you've got your cyclone kit ready for emergency situations. But at this time, it looks highly unlikely that you're going to actually have to prepare for a proper tropical cyclone impact here. It really doesn't look like it's going to happen. I mean, with all the forecast models now taking this system quite far offshore, the Eastern Bay is certainly the worst case scenario here for Queensland at this time, and it's not even a bad scenario at all for Queensland. In fact, the Eastern Bay would actually pan out to be a pretty good solution because it will provide much needed rainfall to areas around Gladstone and Bundaberg. But yeah, this being the worst case scenario at this time, I think that paints a very good picture in terms of the fact that you don't really need to be preparing for this system right now. You don't need to be shopping for it, you don't need to be panic buying for it, you don't need to be evacuating, you don't need to be putting up your storm shutters and getting into your storm shelters yet. If this system does take a turn for Queensland, or the forecast does begin to deteriorate and we see a tropical cyclone landfall back on the cards for south central Queensland, which isn't entirely impossible at this time, it's still a very small chance of happening. I mean, we're talking low single digits, but it is still a chance. We would have at least 4 days of notice there for people to adequately prepare for this system. So this is more of a kind of a bit of a heads up at what's happening in the Coral Sea, as opposed to an informative warning broadcast for the south east regions of Queensland. So if you're thinking that you've got to prepare for a tropical cyclone, you can take that thought out of your head and safely put it to rest that this system is not going to be a Queensland impactor. And if that does change, then there'll be plenty of notice here. My honest take on this system here is still a little bit up in arms, but I've been saying this for the last couple of days. I reckon that this system will go through with its easterly track over the coming couple of days before it does intensify. I think that goes without saying, and I expect some pretty significant intensification out of this, getting up towards high-end Category 3 strength severe tropical cyclone status. And then just as it gets south of the Solomon Islands, I'm expecting that kind of slow turn down towards the south, which could turn a little bit towards the south-southwest at times. The system will then follow down towards the Queensland coastline, by the looks of things actually following down to the Queensland coastline, and then I reckon it's going to get to about the latitude of Mackay, where the actual Eastern Bay has it here at the very last hours of February, and then I reckon it's going to get dragged down by the jet stream passing through New Caledonia down to Norfolk Island and then on towards New Zealand. That's at least my analysis on the track right now. In this situation here, if that does happen, the impacts on Queensland will be negligible. I mean, a couple of showers here and there. Winds are averaging along the coastline between 40 and 50 kilometres an hour, gusting probably up to about 65, maybe 70 kilometres an hour here and there. So really nothing to write home about at all. And that, again, would probably be a worst case scenario. I reckon the system will, once it gets south of Mackay for conditions that we'll just talk about in a few moments, I reckon it will start to begin some terminal weakening. Certainly some pretty rapid weakening at times as it gets itself over some cooler waters and starts to expand in size. It will look like a pretty raggedy and messy system. So it will have a broader area of influence, but it will be a much weaker system by the looks of things. It's more likely to go closer to New Caledonia by the looks of things, considering that a major forecast models between the GFS, the Icon as well, and also the Axis, which all three of them can throw out some pretty wacky model runs here and there. I mean, you take a look at the Axis, it's calling for a monster tropical cyclone south of New Caledonia, but considering 3 out of the 4 major forecast models that I like to follow, at least in the Australian forecasting scene, are taking this system quite close to New Caledonia, and then the other one's kind of taking it close but not too close to Queensland. I think that this system is going to pass closer to New Caledonia than it will do to Queensland. This is my hot take on the forecast. This is my personal opinion on the forecast. This is not actually based off what the system is doing right now, and it's not based off anyone else's forecast. And just like with everything that I upload upload on this channel. It's all my thoughts and analysis here, nothing from anybody else. We're still going to be a couple more days till we know for sure how close this system's going to get to Queensland, if it even does go to Queensland, which again is not looking awfully likely at this time, like I've been saying, low single-digit percentage chances. So it's still a couple more days until we know for certain what the impacts are going to actually be on Queensland. But at this time, I mean, I do not expect anything, and this goes without saying. There is no need to be preparing for a tropical cyclone this time here, and no need to be preparing for significant impacts. I mean, if we take a look at this here, this is 7-day wind accumulations, which is the strongest wind gusts in a week-long period between the major forecast models. Whilst there are some really strong winds in the core of this system here, up to 200 kilometers an hour from the axis forecast, you can see between the east and west, whilst again strong winds are expected, they remain well away from the Queensland coastline by all major forecast models in their analysis. The icon, the axis, the GFS, it's only the east and west forecast which is taking it relatively close to Queensland at this time. Again, really nothing worth writing home about at this time for Queensland, and certainly nothing worth panicking about right now. And I do imagine that tomorrow we're going to wake up and the east and west is going to drag this system right over towards New Caledonia. I still reckon that the forecast models have a chance of swinging towards Queensland, or at least a Queensland bias sort of track at this time. So we're not going to completely discount the chances of a Queensland landfall, but at this time, based off all information that we have to work with, it is looking exceedingly unlikely. Things can change, but based off all the information that I have available to me right now, it really looks unlikely that Queensland is going to get a significant tropical cyclone impact, or even a close pass at this time. That's what's not looking likely at this time. And it's a really nicely developing system, so it's a good thing that this is not going for Queensland, because if it was to beeline itself right now for Mackay or Rockhampton, we would actually be looking at a pretty significant tropical cyclone landfall. So the fact that this is going to stay over the Coral Sea and use up all of the Coral Sea's energy is actually a really, really good thing, and certainly something to be quite happy with if you live along the coast of the Coral Sea and the Pacific Ocean, because it will take a lot of energy out of the Coral Sea, and if it misses Queensland completely, that is a very, very good thing indeed. It'll take a lot of energy, a lot of the energy out of the ocean, which is very, very good indeed. Again, it really doesn't look like this is a significant tropical cyclone in the making, at least for Queensland. It will be a significant tropical cyclone, though, in terms of intensity. I mean, the JTWC forecast, that's the official forecast of the Pacific Ocean. They're a very good weather agency. They've got a very good track record in predicting tropical cyclone intensities, especially in the Coral Sea as well, and in the South Pacific especially. They're very good over there. They're expecting a peak intensity of 90 knots in terms of the 1-minute sustained winds, which would be a comfortable Category 3 strength severe tropical cyclone, in fact approaching Category 4 status, and that will happen sometime around Wednesday or Thursday. And you can see sea temperatures here about 29, pushing 30 degrees Celsius in some of these locations here. It cools off a little bit as you get further south of around a line of Mackay, down to about 27, 28 degrees Celsius, but there's warm still 28 to 20 or 27 to 28 degrees Celsius right down towards Brisbane. Then those sea temperatures then really begin to fall off a cliff down there, but still very warm sea temperatures. This system will have ample fuel to intensify until it's south of a line of about Rockhampton across to New Caledonia, and even then it doesn't look like weakening is going to be rapid, at least not because of the sea temperatures, that's for sure. This system really does have a pretty good future ahead of it in terms of the thermodynamic and the atmospheric forecast. Right now, as we talked about at the start of the video, wind shear is still quite high for this system right now. There's a bit of an upper level anticyclone developing, which is the same situation that we've got over in Western Australia, and why we're expecting still a relatively strong tropical cyclone to take shape there in the next couple of days. But over on top of this Queensland situation, we do have some pretty strong wind, or some stronger winds out of the north, which is displacing the center of circulation and the convection a little bit from this tropical cyclone at this time. And if it wasn't for that, and it wasn't for the wind shear, we'd certainly be looking at a tropical cyclone right now. Even by the Bureau of Meteorology standards, we'd be looking at a fully fledged tropical cyclone. It looks like wind shear will actually pick up a little bit through Wednesday and Thursday, so the system will actually be on its way out by the looks of things, especially by the end of February and into early March, with wind shear values getting up to about 20 to 30 knots by the looks of things. So even if this tropical cyclone does approach the Queensland coastline, it's going to have the jet stream to contend with, so it'll certainly be on the way out as it approaches the Queensland coastline. But right now it looks like atmospheric and thermodynamic conditions are going to be no issue for this system through the early parts of next week, especially Monday night through Tuesday, Wednesday, and in towards Thursday morning. The conditions really looking quite healthy for this tropical cyclone to make the most of its intensification, and an upper level anticyclone, as we know, can do wonders for these systems here, really promoting outflow and really promoting this system to be as strong as it possibly can. And it certainly looks like we're going to be looking at a severe tropical cyclone here. I think that's all but guaranteed at this time. In terms of Category 4 or Category 5 status, I mean, Category 5 status is going to be a very, very hard thing for this storm to achieve. I don't really expect a Category 5 strength severe tropical cyclone out of this. It's possible, but we're talking, again, very low single-digit chances, and of course, with that, a zero chance of a Queensland tropical cyclone landfall, that's for sure. Category 4 is a little bit more likely than that, but it's probably only about a 15% chance of happening. I think Category 3 status is a really good number to be putting on this tropical cyclone at this time. And I would just like to say as well, this system is being really difficult to forecast, not only because of the amount of uncertainty in the tracks and the discrepancies between the forecast models and their ensembles, it is because the system hasn't properly developed yet into a tropical cyclone. Generally speaking, the forecast models have a much easier time initializing and creating a proper and a much more accurate and consistent forecast when these systems develop into fully fledged tropical cyclones. So I do imagine from tomorrow the forecast is going to become a lot clearer and a lot more coherent for Queensland, especially across the central coast, which is still kind of in that chance. It's a very low chance, but they're still in that chance of a tropical cyclone impact. And I imagine that a lot of people there just want that risk to be put to bed. They want to know if they're going to be impacted by a tropical cyclone or not. And in fact, at this point, they'd probably rather be impacted by a severe tropical cyclone than to be up in the air about it for another couple of days. At this point, they're the uncertainty down there is killing them, and certainly a lot of people really wanting to know here. So I imagine the forecast is going to become a lot more consistent, a lot more congruent throughout tomorrow morning and into tomorrow afternoon. It looks like by tomorrow evening we'll know exactly what's going to be happening in terms of the track and the future of this system here. But one thing's for sure, it has had a pretty good start to life, just minus that displaced low-level centre, which is causing a bit of a dry air intrusion. And I'm going a bit more super nerd at this time than what we're used to on the CyclonesOZ channel, but that really does harm tropical cyclone development, and it certainly looks like this system has struggled to attain gale force winds across a wide swathe of its surface area just because of the lack of convection along the northern side of the system. And whilst it is developing along quite nicely, it certainly has a lot more room for improvement at this time. In terms of significant impacts on rainfall or on the rainfall side of things for North Queensland, we don't really have an awful lot of rainfall on the cards. And even as the system develops and moves through the Coral Sea, rainfall is going to be pretty light along the Queensland coastline. We could be seeing some heavy showers here and there around the Whitsundays and out towards the Proserpine area, especially come Thursday and Friday. We might be seeing some isolated heavy bursts of rainfall there, up to about 25 to 50 millimetres an hour, which could cause it to a little bit of minor flash flooding there, and also some significant falls here and there, up to about 150 millimetres possible through early this week, coming up in the Cassowary Coast and into the Daintree rainforest. But again, rainfall accumulations are not going to be significant across North Queensland, and all forecast models can pretty much agree on that. It is a little bit more uncertain and a little bit harder to say, especially as we get later on into the forecast period, depending on if this tropical cyclone does actually make an approach to the Queensland coastline. We'll be seeing much more rainfall, especially across the southeast and the south central. But it pulls me back to my original point, saying that if this system does pan out, even how the Eastern Weather is saying we've got a Category 1 cyclone kind of skirting the coast of Fraser Island here, that's going to do more good than it will harm for the southeast corners of Queensland. Whilst there will be some strong winds and there will be wind damage here and there, trees down, power lines down, you know the usual, it's going to be more like a long-lasting moderate thunderstorm across there with some very welcome, very heavy rainfall at times and some strong winds here and there. It certainly will be quite refreshing for the people of, especially around Gladstone, Rockhampton and Bundaberg, which have really struggled for rainfall over the last couple of months in stark contrast to the remainder of Queensland. It'd be really, really good to see if they do get some rainfall as a result of this system at this time. Unfortunately, even the same thing with the cyclone forecast, it's just too early to tell at this time, and I'll have more information on that as the days draw on. I know this has been a short evening update. I do hope you've enjoyed it or found it informative, and if you have, then please consider leaving a like and also subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. There'll be more updates on this over the coming couple of days as well. We'll have much more information on it tomorrow. We'll have much more information again on this system on Tuesday and Wednesday when it will be approaching peak intensity, and we'll be able to put those answers to bed across Queensland as well if Queensland is going to receive a tropical cyclone impact, which at this time is looking really unlikely, but we're just not absolutely certain for sure right now. That's all that I have time for today. A special shout out to the channel sponsors. The names are Armstrong and again, I could not run the show without them. Their support is much appreciated, and I'll catch you all in the next storm. Goodbye.